Hey y'all, it's Magsy, and what a ride it's been. Season 1 of Local Whidbey with Magsy has been an absolute blast. I've had the joy of sitting down with some of the most audacious, big-hearted, and wonderful islanders this side of the ferry. From artists and farmers to entrepreneurs and musicians, we've only just scratched the surface of what makes Whidbey Island tick. Now don't panic, but I'm taking a little summer break. I'll be using the time to record even more audacious stories, introduce the podcast to those who still don't know it exists, and work behind the scenes on some exciting events for With Magsy. If this is your first listening experience with Local Whidbey Podcast, make sure you check out all of the episodes on the podcast page. Also, feel free to forward this page to a friend on the island. It would be a shame that they would miss out. Speaking of events, mark your calendars. On July 20th, I'll be hosting my very first musical guest for a one-of-a-kind evening. But here's the catch. It's invite only, and you've got to be a subscriber to withmagsy.com to snag a seat. Head over to withmagsy.com to get on the list. Trust me, you won't want to miss this one. And this fall, Season 2 is coming in hot. Expect more interviews with fantastic islanders who are shaking things up in the best possible way. Got a story to tell? Know someone who does? Head to the podcast tab on withmagsy.com and in the drop-down, read the guidelines and click that email to pitch your story or make a recommendation. Until then, let's get to today's episode. If you love to hear stories that you can retell at dinner parties or potlucks, this one is a good one. However, some of you are dirt-loving dreamers and compost-curious creatives. So welcome back to Local Whidbey with Magsy, where we celebrate the audacious islanders' growing community, creativity, and in today's case, literal food. Today we're digging deep, pun very much intended, into the incredible world of the Whidbey Island Organic Farm School. Yes, it's a school, on a farm, where you actually learn how to grow things with your hands, your heart, and your head. No, it's not a hipster's fever dream. It's a real working farm dedicated to teaching the next generation of regenerative farmers how to do things the right way. We're talking soil health, seed-saving sustainable business practices, and how to feed people while healing the planet. And before you picture a dusty lecture hall and a sad carrot, think again. This place is vibrant, hands-on, and bursting with life, ideas, and tomatoes you'll actually want to write home about. So if you've ever fantasized about ditching your inbox for a greenhouse or just want to know who's making sure the future of farming doesn't look like a dystopian salad bar, this episode is for you. So let's get growing.
Hey, Judy. Thanks for agreeing to meet with me and interview. What a lovely place. Wow.
It's pretty special.
Yeah. Do you still love coming here every day?
Oh, every day.
Really?
Absolutely. But we do have to stop occasionally to take breaths and look around.
Yeah.
We can take it for granted sometimes.
Well, listener, we're sitting in it's called the pizza.
It's called the picnic shelter.
The picnic shelter. And there's a pizza.
There is a wood-fired oven.
Wood-fired oven in here. And it's beautiful. It smells good is what I've noticed. You just smell, is it cedar?
It's a lot of cedar, a lot of locally sourced wood. So it just smells.
It smells good. And the windows are big so you can see the farm. It's just really nice. So my first question, what brought you to Whidbey Island?
What brought me to Whidbey Island was at the time I was partnered with a man who had a young daughter. And he didn't want her to grow up entirely in Seattle. He wanted her to be out in nature more. And so at that time, I was finishing up my degree at UW, and we were taking an awful lot of field trips, especially geology field trips here to Whidbey. So we started looking around Whidbey, and this is where we ended up. I'm originally from Texas, and so Whidbey, especially here in the Max Mountain Valley, because there's a lot of open space, you can kind of pull your shoulders back and feel like you're not hidden in the forest all the time. You can feel like you're out in the middle of open space.
Well, talking about open space and being from Texas, I am from Dallas, Texas. My mother's from Fort Worth, so we talked about that, listener. But Texas is very flat. And when I've had friends visit me there from the Northwest, they always ask me how far they're looking. Where here, that's not the problem. No one would say that. And I always would say, let me find a water tower and I'll tell you. People in Oregon see Mount Hood, or we see Mount Rainier, or I look at Mount Baker. And so I know how far I'm looking.
Right.
You're in Texas, you really can't tell.
You can't tell. And in Texas, everything's by how long it takes you to get from here to there. It's never the miles. It's like,
Right.
how far is it to Dallas? Oh, it's 45 minutes.
That's right. That's exactly right. That's right. And the funny part too is my husband and I don't have any problem driving because you drive in those big cities everywhere. And someone said, "Well, you're going down to Langley to eat?" And I live just north of Coopville. And yes, why?
You'd think you need a passport.
Yeah. And the couple at Museo told me that they had someone in their gallery, and the guy said, I haven't been here to Langley in so long. And he said, it's probably been 4 years. And they said, oh, really? Where did you come from? Thinking off island. He said, Freeland.
Island life changes you.
I know. So with that said, what led you to the organic farm school?
Oh, that's a really good question. So I'm the first of my family in terms of generations to not grow up on a farm.
Okay.
And so that's one thing, is I was attracted to the ability to be close to a farm again. The other is I am really, more than anything else, a student of systems and complexity. And there is nothing more beautifully complex than our food system.
Right.
So those were the drivers for me, wanting to get back to like this ancestral family proximity to growing food.
Oh, okay.
And just the beauty of the complexity that goes into it.
So have you always been passionate about sustainable agriculture?
I've always been passionate about the integrity of systems, environmental systems, democratic systems, social systems. Organic's not perfect.
No.
But it's a model that people understand. Yeah. So am I passionate about organics? I'm passionate about environmental use of land.
Right.
And organic gets us close.
Gets you closer to that. Yeah. So what was your first experience working on a farm?
Working on a farm probably was this one. I mean, my grandparents had a farm, and I had stories of people working on farms. My dad picked cotton, pulled cotton, grew dairy cows, you name it. But for me, here was the first working on the farm.
Okay.
And I still don't consider myself a farmer. I'm a farmer of farmers, but I'm not a farmer.
You're a farmer of farmers.
Mm-hmm.
So explain that to the listener.
In other words, I couldn't draw up a crop plan to save my soul.
Right.
A farmer can.
Right.
I can go out and weed, but I probably stir up more weed seeds than I get rid of because I don't really do it the way a farmer would do it. I do it the way a gardener would do it.
Is that my problem?
Weed management is a beast, let me tell you.
Yes.
But I'm a farmer of farmers in that I am totally, absolutely, passionately, enthusiastically supportive of people who believe and feel that farming is their future. I will do almost anything to try and get them in a position that will lead to their success. So that's why I consider myself a farmer.
So what led me to this interview was Steve from Foxtail Farms. And he said to me, he was one of my first interviews. He said, you need to go out to the organic farm school because it's really great and interview them. And so that's what led me here. And he would be a farmer, someone you farmed.
Yes. Thank you, Stephen.
Yeah.
Stephen and Amy, Foxtail Farms.
Yes. They're amazing. For listeners who might not be familiar, what exactly is the Organic Farm School and what makes it different from agricultural programs, other ones?
Sure. So the Organic Farm School is, like farming, a complex system. So we know the statistics that American farmers are aging out. And if you want to talk about a supply chain issue that's about to smack us all in the face, it's that we're not going to have enough farmers.
That is true.
So we started with a hyper focus on training new farmers. Now that's still part of our focus. But over the years, we have learned that it's not enough to train the farmers. We need to offer communities the insight into why farmers are so important,
Right.
why farming is so important, and how to be an active player in our food system with the farmers.
Okay.
So at the Organic Farm School, we train farmers out in the field specifically as apprentices. Those are people who've made the decision. They know they want to farm. They're here to learn how to manage a farm. But we also learned a while back that some people don't know yet if they want to farm. So we offer short-term programs for people to come try it for a month. And then we do an awful lot of community engagement so that people begin to slow down long enough to taste the difference between fresh greens that are grown here on Whidbey Island, harvested on Whidbey Island, and eaten on Whidbey Island, as compared to greens that were harvested 2 to 4 weeks ago,
Yes.
trucked in a refrigerated truck. Nothing wrong with that. We need that. But we work with communities so that they can taste the difference. And they can begin to understand, wow, this is important. Therefore, the people doing this work are important.
Right.
How can we better support them?
So what is a typical student?
There is no typical student. We have had students, and we're calling them apprentices now,
Okay.
but we have had people come here to learn straight out of high school, 19, never been away from mom and dad in their life, fly out to Whidbey Island, and here they go. We've had people in their 50s. We've had probably a little bit over half of them have been women. Some have had a college degree or some college. Some have not had any college. Some have come from another profession, nurse practitioners, computer science, bankers, others. It's just always been about environment and food for them. So no average, no normal.
So it's really more of a passion about food.
It's a passion. I would say that's the driving force, is the
So I'm
passion
wondering about
about
the high
food.
school student.
The person who came straight from high school, at the time, their grandmother, they were from Georgia, their grandmother had a farm and said, one of these days you're going to inherit my farm. You need to know how to do it. She took her seriously, and she came out and went through the training.
Wow.
She is still farm adjacent, but she moved back to Georgia. First of all, when she was here, she finished the program. Then she went to work at Lavender Wind Farm. And then she went back to Georgia. She found a farm that was like rent to own. She bought the farm. She had a farm business. She had a little baby. The little baby was on her transplanting tomatoes within 2 weeks. But then ultimately she realized what we're realizing, that in terms of a future economically, it just wasn't quite there at the scale she was growing.
Right.
But fabulous farmer, still farm adjacent, still working alongside farmers, just at a different perspective.
Okay. So is it all hands-on, or is it classroom training as well?
We have a little bit of classroom training, especially at the beginning, on soils, because if you don't see soils as your business partner, you're going to go out of business real fast. And then toward the end, we have what I believe is one of the best business planning series for farmers, beginning farmers, that's out there. So people here actually learn what's the difference between a budget and a cash flow. Big difference.
Yeah.
What exactly is QuickBooks and why should I use it, or what should I use instead? How do I build my operations plan? How do I build my marketing plan? How do I save enough money over time so that when something breaks, I have money to replace
fantastic. So it's not just about growing vegetables.
No, because we want you to be able to grow vegetables for the long term, not just for 1 or 2 years. So you have to have business skills.
Yeah. Wow. So is there any part of the curriculum that's always surprises new students?
I would say it is that business planning, not the curriculum, because that's why they come.
Right.
Very often they'll say, I chose to come to the Organic Farm School because of the business planning. But it is the intensity and the depth and the breadth of the business planning and all of the things you have to think about when you're building a business plan that surprises them.
Yeah. Wow. And your background in systems is probably perfect
Mine and our entire staff, because farmers are, by very nature, systems thinkers.
Yeah.
They have to be.
Yeah. Wow. So the farm school places a strong emphasis on regenerative practices. For those who aren't familiar, can you explain what that means and why it's so important right now?
Absolutely. Regenerative ag, first of all, I want to say there's no one definition.
Okay.
You could ask 20 different people, they'll give you 20 different definitions. I also want to say that there's no such thing as a perfectly regenerative farm because it's not a static state you get to. As soon as you get there, you have to regenerate in a different way.
Okay.
But regenerative methods, some of the key principles are diversity, which means diversity of crops, but also I would say diversity of people.
Okay.
And diversity of markets. Don't just focus on one thing, focus on multiple things. The other is keep the soil covered. No, no bare soil, at least no longer than you have to for weed management. You want to keep living things in that soil to keep the soil alive.
Right.
Another is the inclusion of livestock. And this can be a little contentious in our current society, when we're talking about plant-based diet and all sorts of things. But when you look at the way Earth has evolved over time, and when you look at a healthy soil system, it almost always involves livestock.
Right.
So diversity, keep it covered, livestock, those are the big ones. You'll hear a lot about no-till. Don't use a plow, don't use a tractor, don't. Well, here in the Pacific Northwest, if you don't till, you've got a weed management problem because we don't get hot enough or cold enough.
Right.
You weed out there in the middle of the field, and those weeds just think they've been transplanted.
Yeah.
So tillage
They don't think they're weeds.
They don't. And to be honest, they're not. They're doing good things too. They're photosynthesizing. They're feeding the soil. They're just in a place we don't want them to be.
Right.
So I would lean much more heavily on the diversity, the keep the soil covered and inclusion of livestock than I would on no-till.
Okay.
Those are kind of the big pieces.
Before we left Texas, Mike and I had gotten into watching any documentary on farming, and we're not farmers. He's an environmental health and safety engineer, and I'm in the tech industry. And so, but we love to watch them. His grandparents had a farm, but we were really interested and never paid to go because we didn't have any reason to, but just keeping track of them and getting their newsletter, was a group that was teaching regenerating the soil, dead soil, with buffalo and in Fredericksburg, Texas. Sweet. Yeah. And I was very interested watching them and following them on social media and the things. They'd had a group of people out there and all the different, even slaughtering a bison and learning how to prepare it for food and how not to waste any part of it. But it was really more about the bison's poop all over.
Yep.
That was regenerating the dead dirt.
Pee and poo.
Pee and poo.
And I'm guessing that they were probably rotating them rather than leaving them just in one spot.
No. And that was part of watching them because he likes bison so much. And so watching the videos they would put on YouTube and where they're transferring them to another place and them running like you would see in the Dakotas or something like that. Yeah. Yeah.
I'll have to check on that. My brother and sister-in-law live in Kerrville. So next time I go down, I'll have to check it out.
Yeah, it's very interesting. What are some of the biggest misconceptions people have about organic or small scale farming?
Oh, there are so many. I'll start with organic. Some of the misconceptions about organic is that it's this elitist, that's the biggest word, elitist model that people think is perfect. And I would say the people who are doing organic ag will be the first to tell you it's not perfect. When I buy organic at the grocery store, and I don't buy from us, people will be in front of me or behind me in the line. And they'll say, oh, I don't buy organic. They've proven it's not any better for you than the other. Well, the science is changing on that. But I'll tell them whether it's better for me or not, I can guarantee you it's better for the farmer to not be surrounded by all those chemicals all day long.
Yeah.
So that's what I'll say about organic.
Okay.
And when you're talking about 1,000 acres of organic, I'm not really sure that's organic anymore. That's a monoculture. There may not be using the chemicals.
You're saying most organic is grown on small scale farm?
No, I'm saying that I would not define larger scaled organic farms is necessarily truly organic.
Okay.
That does not mean that there are not 1,000-acre, 5,000-acre certified organic farms. I'm just saying that I think you lose the diversity and you lose the soil health at that level. When we're talking about small scale farms, first of all, you have to ask somebody, what do you mean by small? Do you mean an eighth of an acre, a garden? Do you mean a community scale farm like ours on 5 to 10 acres? Do you mean 10 to 20 acres? Do you mean 50 acres? Do you mean a family farm, which is more like 100 to 500 acres? You kind of have to know what you're talking about. But the biggest myth about small scale farms is that they're just so beautiful. And it's such a peaceful life. And you just feel so close to nature. And it's just so wonderful. Well, it is wonderful and it is beautiful, but it's a whole lot of work.
Yeah.
And it is a business. If you are growing food on the assumption that you're going to make enough money to do it all over again the next year, it is a business.
Yeah.
It is a very valuable business in terms of our communities and our society, but it is a business.
So when I was talking to Foxtail Farms, I was asking him, being that he's from the South, if he missed growing things that typically only grow there, like okra.
No, but he grows okra.
Yeah. So we talked about that. And I told him my dissatisfaction with the tomatoes here. They just don't taste the same. And that led to the question is, have you really honed down, as long as you've been out here now, on what sells here? Because you have to make a living. It's just the same thing on all the stands? Have you found something that people are like, oh, you can only get that Foxtail Farms? And so we talked about that a little bit. He said that's harder, than you think, because people may not be growing it because it doesn't grow well here, or it gets eaten up by bugs, or, that type of thing. So,
and if it doesn't typically grow here, people aren't used to eating it. And so you almost have to educate them about how wonderful it is. Case in point, we grew kohlrabi, which I grew up eating.
Yeah.
But we grew it here when we were back at Greenbank Farm, and nobody knew what it was. They didn't know how to eat it. It never sold really well. So we stopped growing it for a while.
Yeah.
And then we had a farmer who was also from the South who came. And so we thought, well, we'll try it again. But we put more effort into actually having people taste it and try it and bringing it to events. Now we can't keep it because people buy it so fast. So
yeah, it's really good. We have that issue with after college, we went to Houston, and that's where we got into having crawfish boils. And then we moved to Portland, and we tried to have a crawfish boil. We had to get it from Central Oregon, and we ordered everyone 3 pounds like we do in Texas, and no one even ate half a pound. We had so much crawfish left over. Thankfully, we got shrimp for everybody as well. But I know we sat there and peeled crawfish for 4 hours afterwards to freeze it because people aren't used to eating it.
That's right.
And quite frankly, it's a pain in the neck to peel crawfish. But yeah, we learned that too.
And it's an interesting part of regenerative ag because there is a push to go to more perennial crops. But the top 2, quote, vegetables, and people will argue that one of them is not a vegetable, it's a fruit. But the top 2 vegetables that people eat, it's potatoes and tomatoes.
Yeah.
Those are not annuals.
Right.
But they are the top 2 by far. So if you're going to try and change the way people eat, really?
Yeah.
How long's that going to take?
Yeah.
So in the meantime, you try to introduce the regenerative methods as best you can to the existing diet that people eat.
And to that point, the reason is my next question was about what we talked about before, about making a living. If you're not following what people eat wherever you live in the United States, you will struggle, right?
Absolutely. One of the first things we tell people who've come here to learn how to farm, the reason it's so important to do a business plan, a marketing plan, and then your crop plan. Doesn't matter if you love growing rutabagas. If you think it's the most fabulous thing you've ever seen, it's beautiful and it's so delicious and it's nutrient dense. If people aren't going to buy it, you're going to go broke.
Yeah. I learned that not in farming, obviously, but I worked with over 200 retailers in my career. And I would say 80% of them, if not more, did not have business plans. And I was really shocked. It was a passion. They wanted to have this kind of business. Just they want to go to market, buy all the stuff, and open it up, and they will come. Not so much.
Not so much.
Not so much.
I mean, you can do it for a year.
Mm-hmm.
You can do it beautifully for a year.
Mm-hmm.
Not so sure you can do it the second year.
Yeah, sustaining it. That's right. So, what's the most challenging part of running a program like this?
That you can't do it all.
Mm.
And that, especially in this climate right now, you can't, just as a farmer can't depend on one single crop. If you're a community facing farm, you can't depend just on cucumbers.
Right.
You have to have a diversified crop plan.
Right.
You have to have a diversified way of supporting the organization. So grants are not so great right now.
Nope.
We won't get into all the reasons why. We'll just say grants are not so great right now.
Right.
Earned revenue is really important. It's also getting a little tricky. Our weather is changing. Our climate is changing. So you have to kind of hedge your bets there. And right now, again, not to get in the reasons why, the economy is not exactly stable.
Right.
And so trying to generate funds through philanthropy at a time here on Whidbey where so many organizations need support, that's the most challenging part.
And a lot of people with the income to support in their giving, when you have financial systems that are in the toilet, they're not going to be able to do that.
That's right. Or if they're afraid, they won't be able to do that.
Yeah.
Also, again, I forget the numbers now. When I was working with WSU Extension, and that was years ago, I think there were like 487 nonprofits on the island. I think it's a lot more than that now.
Yeah.
So imagine how each of those, which has been formed out of a need that the community needs, right?
Right.
They're addressing domestic violence, children not having enough food, so they feed them at school to take home, elders not being able to cook for themselves, libraries needing friends of libraries. All of these nonprofits were formed to address something this community needs.
Right.
And now a lot of them that were grant dependent, that funding just went away. Look at our local school districts losing state funding for environmental programs, losing the AmeriCorps volunteer program. And then you look at other programs that also are losing their funding or their donors are fearful of not contributing. We're at a very, let's say that it is giving us an incredible opportunity to reinvent ourselves as the nonprofit side of the island. And to figure out how to work together and how to continue to fill those gaps, even if we don't know where the money is going to come from.
True. Wow.
So you asked what the most challenging thing is. That's probably the most challenging thing. What's the most rewarding thing is doing that work.
Yeah. My next question was, what's the most rewarding?
It's doing that work.
Okay.
You know, telling that story, being very super clear on what we do here at the Organic Farm School, and then taking that story out into the community through a podcast like yours.
That's right.
Through our Substack, through our newsletter, just sharing the information about how, like I said at the beginning, if you want to talk about a supply chain issue that is just about to smack us in the face, it is the lack of new people entering the profession of farming.
Right.
So taking that story out, taking the story out about how regenerative ag is just the way our grandparents farmed. It's nothing rocket science. It's just that we can study it and see how it works now.
Right.
Telling that story to people and getting them excited about it and getting them passionate about what their food's coming from and getting them incredibly supportive of these beginning farmers. That's the best part of this job.
Yeah, I can imagine. So, with the most rewarding, my next question was, do you have favorite inspiring moments here in your tenure that you've been here?
Oh, it's always seeing somebody who's come here to learn, go off and farm. That's got to be the best. It's absolutely got to be the best. That, or it's an odd thing to say, but during COVID, when people were afraid, And I remember you had to stand in line at the grocery store. They would only let so many people in at a time. We thought, well, we've got food. We were considered an essential service. And so at the time, there weren't all these apps like there are now, like Barn to Door. And so we just set up a spreadsheet and we told people to email us what they want. We told them what was fresh this week. They would email us what they wanted and how much. And they would drive up to the barn and we put the bag in their back seat. And then we noticed over time people were coming and they were sitting in their cars just to see their neighbors.
Oh.
They were coming to the farm because this was where the food was. And it was a big open space, so they could find a place to park and they would just sit. And it was like their connection back to this amazing community that Whidbey Island is, that suddenly everybody felt shut off from.
Yeah.
And that just reminded me, I'm going to cry just thinking about it. It just reminded me of the importance of food throughout time.
Yeah.
As the source of nutrition for our bodies, but also the source of nutrition for our spirits.
That's right.
So,
Right. So to that point, I had mentioned that I moved here during COVID. And at the time, my husband traveled back to Spokane. He was in charge of the COVID response for the division of Honeywell that he was in. And so back and forth a lot. And there's no way for me to meet people. And I live on a street of mostly retired people. So they would say hi to me when I was out in my yard from far away. But then when we all could get back together again in 2023, that's when I created with Magsy, which was just a supper club you subscribe to get an invitation, because I wanted to meet people. I didn't really know how any other way. And I'm a foodie, big time. I was one of those when my son was in second grade, I read Fast Food Nation. I lived in Portland at the time, and that was the end of us eating food that was in boxes and no more fast food. So that's when I really got interested in food and realized that there were so many foods that I liked that I said I didn't because they weren't cooked right as I was growing up. Like if you overcook Brussels sprouts, they're awful. And so I just didn't know that there was these foods that I loved. And so I thought, that's what I'm going to do here is so I can meet people around food. I don't know if they'll come over just to meet me, but maybe they'll come over because I have food sitting out here.
We always hang out in kitchens, right?
Always, right?
And we never turn down a hand that's got food in it.
Right.
So, yeah, food is so powerful. And it's also, especially in these horribly, tragically divided times, something that connects us all.
Yeah.
Everybody eats.
Everybody, you have to. So with that, and we already know the story of Foxtail Farms being successful. Do you have a success story from someone who came here, and what did they do afterwards?
Oh, we've got lots of
So many.
success stories. What's interesting, because I would not be fair to not mention this, we have people who have gone straight from the program to start their farms. And they've done beautifully. They really have. And like I say, the economy, every year, the economy just gets harder and harder, and it's stacked against community scale farmers. That said, we need every scale of farming. We need the backyard gardener in a container to the half acre. We need all of them. We need the 5,000 acre farms. We need them all. And we have had students who've gone back into almost every layer of ag. They've either gone back to their life as a chemical engineer, but they have a big garden in their backyard for their family to eat out of. We have graduates who've gone on to not start a farm, but to become an organic certifier. We have graduates who've gone on to start a farm, start a bigger farm, merge with a bigger farm, and then decide, this model still doesn't work, but I can't leave the business because I love it. So they're working in Iowa with Seed Savers Exchange.
Okay.
We've had farmers like Annie and Nathaniel who, they grow vegetables, but what they're really growing is seed.
Yeah.
And if you want to talk about regenerative, powerful, passionate story, talk to me again later about seed.
Okay.
But yeah, we have had many more successes than we have had people who have chosen to not go into farming.
Right.
But I got to tell you, if they came to the farm school, went through the training and then decided not to farm, that's okay too.
Yeah,
Because they realized it before they spent all that money.
that's right. Well, and it's not that they didn't use what they learned here and whatever
That's
they
right.
were going to do next.
We have not had anybody come to the farm that I look back and go, oh, I wish they hadn't come here.
Yeah,
Not a single one.
that's great.
Everyone has left knowing more, feeling more, appreciating more than when they came.
So I know that you're more than likely familiar with many farm schools across the United States. So my question is, how has Whidbey Island shaped this organic farm school?
Oh, that's easy. The community.
Okay. Yeah.
This is one of the most amazing communities I've ever seen. And I'm sure there are lots of them across the country.
Right.
I just think we're extraordinarily fortunate as a training program to be in the middle of one of them.
Yeah.
And then in terms of differences between us and other training programs, we put people on tractors. We want them to know, even if they decide not to farm with a tractor, we want them to know what a tractor does.
Right.
We also teach seed production and seed harvesting, which is not common. We do introduce livestock, so they get both vegetable and livestock experience, and the business planning.
Okay. I've always wondered, and this just popped in my head, how ocean air changes. Does it change farming here opposed to, say, somewhere in Iowa?
It changes it. On the island, I would say the reason it changes it is we just don't get that intense heat.
Right. Cools everything off.
Now, granted, I'm from Texas. You're from Texas. There are days out here, I swear it's hotter than it is in Texas.
Really?
But I think it's because of the angle of the sun and the length of the days.
Okay.
So even when I'm thinking, this has got to be over 110,
Yeah.
it's like 80.
I know. Well, plus you've gotten used to living there.
Oh, well, yes and no. But the temperature's a big one.
Yeah.
And then because it doesn't get that hot, we don't have the same pests.
Right. That's the truth.
So that is one of the biggest, not complaints, but when a graduate leaves here and goes to Iowa or Kansas or Oklahoma, within months they're going, why didn't you warn us about the bugs?
I know. So when we moved from Houston to Portland in 1998, the very first thing I noticed was the lack of bugs, which I was so happy about. I wasn't even afraid of the bees because to me, they're the reason why there's such beautiful flowers and farmers markets everywhere. And then later, we had children and we had to move back to Southeast Texas for a couple of years, which I was super distraught about. And that was the first thing my boys noticed. They stepped out of the house. My youngest son stepped in a red ant hill.
Or a fire ant hill.
Fire ant hill. Yeah, fire ant hill. And then when he started school, he insisted on wearing socks with his sandals. And I said, we're not in Oregon anymore. You can't wear socks with your sandals in Texas. And he goes, I don't care. I'm not going to get eaten up by red ants. And I said, well, there won't be red ants at school. He said, how do you know? And the love bugs and the roaches and the termites. And that was one of the first things they noticed was that they didn't like about Texas was the bugs.
The bugs. I mean, I actually have a business name. I don't have a personal business anymore, but I have a business name. It's Girl Out of Texas.
Yeah.
You can take the girl out of Texas, but you can't take the Texas out of the girl.
That's exactly right.
I love the land of Texas. I love the open spaces. I do not love the fire ants.
Right.
If they had been a thing when I was growing up, I would not have such kind feelings towards my home state.
Right. That's right.
They're just
It's
awful.
awful.
It's
Yes.
just awful.
Yes, I know. So, what does the island community bring to the program? And what does the program give back in return?
It's support. And I don't mean financial support. Yes, it's financial support, but this community, whether it's because of us or right along with us or in spite of us, I don't know, but this community gets it. That the people who are growing our food are honorable. They are worthy of our support. And that means They ask how they are when they come to the farm stand. They invite them to dinner. They make donations for special prizes. They treat them like rock stars.
Cool.
That's huge.
Yeah.
It's just absolutely huge. And what they get back is a sense of belonging here at the farm. They get a sense that these farmers know about them as people. One of the things that I am really focused on this year, last year, 5 years, I don't know how long, but there are so many farmers that are just so darn busy growing the food that they never stop to think it's going to land on somebody's plate.
Oh.
And there are so many people who buy at the grocery store or they buy in the frozen food aisle, especially, and they never think about the person who had to plant it, weed it, harvest it, sell it. So trying to connect those two groups. And that's what I think happens here on Whidbey Island.
Okay.
Is that connection between the eater and the grower.
Yeah. So what's vision for the future for the organic farm school? Or maybe new projects, partnerships, dreams on the horizon?
The dream is that the awareness of the importance of farmers just keeps growing.
Okay.
Projects, we've always got new projects. Check our website. We've always got new projects, but the exciting ones right now, thanks to the Whidbey Camino Land Trust, which is another phenomenal superstar of Island County, which is both Whidbey and Camino. One of their most recent acquisitions is the Keystone Farm and Forest Preserve, which is just south of the Keystone Ferry.
Okay.
And they have offered us the chance to manage about 30 to 35 acres of agricultural land there.
Okay.
With the goal that as soon as we can get more farmers to be trained in the business side of things, that they can have free to no cost access to land to get started.
Okay.
That's huge. If we can start creating a roadmap from training to incubator to first years to success. So that's a huge project for us.
Yeah.
And then there's always more to do here.
Yeah. So do you have a specific way or that you would like the community to invest more of their time, or basically kind of thinking of how more we can help support your work?
So the first is please visit our website, just because it's a lot easier for us to post everything on the website than to chase down, is this going to be on Instagram? Is this going to be on Facebook? Is this going to be on a podcast? Is this going to... So visit our website and sign up for our newsletter. The other is we do these things called Farm Fridays, and they are the fourth Friday of May, June, July, August, and September. Something will be coming out of that wood-fired oven to go onto the potluck table. We have open mic music. It's just fun to come down here on a Friday late afternoon, watch the sunset, see the birds get replaced by the bats, lots of space for the kids to run around. Fall in love with farming here.
Yeah.
And then you'll be amazed at how many farms you see.
Yeah.
Because your eyes are open.
Well, also that kind of leads to my next question is, if someone's listening to this today and is feeling the tug to get their hands in the soil, and what's your advice for them? Someone that's like, you know what, let's just tear up our whole backyard and start growing our own food.
Start small.
Start small.
Start small.
Would that be like a container garden?
Well, it depends. If you've never grown any food, start with a container garden, just because you can control it. Because I guarantee if you dig up your whole backyard, what's going to grow fastest and first?
Weeds.
You got it. So if you've never grown food, start with containers. If you've grown containers and you want to go up to a garden, start with some raised beds, maybe 4 foot by 8 foot.
Yeah.
If you've done the raised bed thing, okay, then you can tear up part of your yard. Okay. But start with part of your yard.
A little bit at a time.
A little bit at a time. It just gives you more time to be a good observer.
So that's what we started with this year, is a container garden or the raised bed, but it's like up to here. And so I was telling Mike that it looked like a buffet for the deer because it's right at that level. So what was he going to do?
Build a fence.
Or put over it. He still hasn't. And he's been very lucky so far. There has been, I guess they don't like the vegetables that we're growing. It's not very big, but it's a good start for him,
That's right.
for sure. Wait and see.
No matter what happens, that's the other thing about starting in the pursuit of growing food. Even if it doesn't work, you've learned an awful lot. You've spent a lot of time outside. You've seen what does eat your garden. You've come to appreciate the deer and the bunnies and the birds and the water and the bees. There's no way to absolutely fail at this.
Well, for me, instead of food, when the house that we bought had zero landscaping front or backyard. So that was my big thing. And just my own vision. And it looks great, but it's a lot of work because I wanted it to look more like a Southern garden than Northwest.
You ain't in the South anymore.
No, because, it just seems like weeds love the Southern garden more than they do, say, a Northwest garden with all the evergreens and things like that. But it's been fun. We've learned a lot. I'm growing flowers from seed for the first time a little bit. And he's doing the vegetables. So we'll see how that goes this year.
And also remember that if you start growing food and it just doesn't work, there are a lot of farms here on Whidbey Island that would love to put food on your plate.
We order from the food hub. We, of course, we're big fans of Foxtail Farms because Mike works in Bothell. And so he'll stop in there. And now they've got their own little store thing there now too. And so we're big fans of theirs and he stops a lot there. And we learned from them that we like all the variations of radishes.
Isn't that fun?
We didn't know there were so many variations of radishes.
I didn't know anything about winter radishes until I started working here. And now it's like, I love those things.
Yes, very, very good. Okay, so before we wrap this up, I have some quick fire questions for you. So see what comes to mind.
Okay.
So what's your favorite vegetable to grow or someone grows for you?
My favorite thing to have other people grow for me is Brussels sprouts, but my favorite thing to grow is herbs.
Herbs. What's your favorite herb?
Dill.
Dill. Oh, my first time I just planted some dill. Okay. What's one farm task you secretly love?
Weeding.
Really? Wow.
It's meditative if you catch them early. I don't like it when they're 2 feet tall.
Do you know that Lexi, the florist, told me the same thing? And I said, "Are you for hire?" She said, "No."
I like my meditation private. Thank you.
Okay. What's a tool you can't live without on a farm?
Oh, it depends on the farm, but I would say just a shovel.
Just a shovel?
You can use a shovel in 100 different ways.
Yes, that's true. Best snack after a long day in the field?
Cucumbers.
And that's the truth.
Because they're cool.
They are. And you can also just put stuff on them. It tastes so good.
And if you're out in the field and it's summer, you can actually eat it in the field.
And you can eat a whole one and you won't get fat.
That's right. That's right.
Okay. Compost, oddly satisfying or just plain gross?
Both.
Both.
It's oddly satisfying if you give it the attention it deserves.
Okay.
It's gross if you expect it to just work magic and you just throw everything in it.
Yeah. Yeah. Rainy day on the farm, cozy or chaotic?
Depends on the season. It's rainy. The summer rain, cozy.
Okay. What's the most underrated herb?
Underrated herb. I think peppermint. Because people hate it because it spreads so much, but it's so good in so many different ways.
Well, I discovered from someone I follow on Instagram, she's in Snohomish, and I think she's cooking from everything she grows every single day. And she introduced me to lovage. And I stopped by there and I didn't know that's like celery. And she pulled some out of the ground, just handed it to me, and it's come back up this year. I'm so excited. I don't even want to cut it. But it does. The leaves, they taste just like celery.
Yeah. You've got some out by the non-functional water tower out there.
And I had never heard of it. She just grabbed some and took a bite out of it. What is that? Celery? She said, nope.
There you go.
It's great for making broths, soups, things like that. Okay. So who is your dream guest teacher or collaborator on the farm school? At the farm school?
There are so many, but actually we have one that I adore. She used to work with us, and I'm going to give her props. Raylani Kessler. She worked with us for 2 seasons, and she's gone off to UBC. She's working on her PhD in soil science.
Mhm.
She used to be heavily devoted to ballet, and she went from ballet to farming.
Mhm.
And she is just the deepest thinker, clearest communicator, most grounded young person I have met in a very long time.
Now I want to meet her. Okay.
You should. She's amazing.
Okay.
Excellent
One
person.
book every aspiring farmer should read.
Oh, anything by Wendell Berry or a book called Nourishment.
Okay. Nourishment. If you weren't farming or running the school, and I know that you farm farmers, what would you be doing?
Quick answer would be writing
Mhm.
or photography. But in terms of work, if I wasn't working in this field and I was younger, masonry,
Masonry. Wow.
building rock walls.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't expect that, but that's cool.
I know, crazy.
Well, Judy, thank you so much for sitting with me today. It was very interesting. I think everyone's going to love this interview as much as I did. And it was so very nice to meet you.
It was very nice to meet you. And please come visit the farm.
I will. We will.
Good.
Thank you.
That's a wrap on another episode of Local Whidbey with Magsy. Whether you're all about island life or just island bound in spirit, I hope you all are audacious islanders. Yes, that is a plug for my merch. Thanks for tuning in and celebrating the people, places, and magic that make Whidbey Island so special. Don't forget to share the love, tell a friend, leave a review if you have something positive to say, and follow along for more stories from our audacious island. Until next time, keep it quirky, keep it local, and keep loving Whidbey. Looking to create a life filled with connection, creativity, and a little bit of audacious charm? At withmagsy.com, we bring people together in all the best ways. Join the Supper Club, where food, laughter, and great company make every gathering unforgettable. Tune in to the Local Whidbey with Magsy podcast, celebrating the small businesses and bold dreamers that make up audacious islanders and shape Whidbey Island. Transform your home with Spaces, a personalized interior styling service that reflects your style and brings your space to life. Ready to gather, be inspired, and make your space truly yours? Visit withmagsy.com today.